All right, guys, can you hear me? Can you hear me on here? Can you guys hear me? Yes, all right. So we're going to do this a little different. All right, give me 1 second to finish setting up and we'll get this show started, guys. Thanks for your patience and hanging in there with me. I'll be right back. Hey everybody, how we doing tonight? Think we got things resolved here a little bit. Can you guys hear me all right? No audio, Curtis? Can't hear me? It was just working. Can you guys hear me? Yes, Kathleen. All right, all right. So I don't know what's going on, but my computer has no audio settings. So I'm actually running my visual and audio off of my phone. And then I will work on trying to get everything set up back on my laptop. So not sure what's happening. But good news is I can still operate my laptop. We'll still have the slideshow for everything. So we can go through and have this discussion. It's just going to be a little bit different camera angle than what y'all are used to. So that being said, welcome everybody. It is good to see you all tonight. I saw some faces I haven't seen in a while. I saw John Lamb out there, Roger Blair. Hey Roger, how you doing? Some names I haven't seen before. I want to welcome you all in. Maybe you've been here, maybe I just haven't seen you. Jason McQuarrie, Henry. Welcome, welcome. Little Twisted, this show is for you, buddy. You're the one that sent the request for this topic. So we're going to roll with it. Catherine Gay, how you doing, Catherine? Nice to see you. We got Henry out there. John Lamb, I saw. Phyllis Perry, nice to see you. Kathleen Michael, Liana King, Curtis, how you doing, Curtis? I saw Standing Stones in there somewhere. So welcome everybody. Glad to see you guys. Thanks for bearing with me with all the technical issues we've had going on. Sparky McLean, K. Dye, welcome. John Stewart, Sweetly Morbid Bear. Now that is an interesting name there. I saw Ms. Nada Decker, my dear sweet mama, in the audience. She always listens in. Audacious Amber, welcome. All right. So Twisted sent in a request about some human skulls that were supposedly found with horns on them. And I got a picture in a Facebook post and all that kind of good stuff on it. So I started doing some digging. And, you know, it was really interesting what I came up with. And so we're going to discuss tonight the horned skulls from Pennsylvania. All right. So as usual, I put together myself a little bit of a slideshow just so we can kind of keep growing with everything and keep track of it all and keep it going. So the first thing I came across was a newspaper article from the Times Herald out of Olean, New York, dated Saturday, August 12th, 1916, and on page 6. So I typed out the article because it was kind of hard to read. And then I'll show you the picture of the article as well, so you can see it's actually an article. This article is labeled, Men Had Horns Then. Archaeologists find skulls of prehistoric giants near Athens, Pennsylvania. Athens, Pennsylvania. The archaeologists who were traversing the Susquehanna River Valley, visiting sites of Indian villages and digging up the Aborigines and other relics, are said to have made a most astounding discovery on the Murray Farm near here in finding bones of 68 prehistoric men. The average height of these men when their skeletons were assembled was 7 feet, while many were much taller. Additional evidence of their gigantic size is found in the massive stone battle axes in their graves. The average age of these men is said to have been from 30 to 40. Another amazing point of this discovery is the allegation that perfectly formed skulls were found from which horns grew straight out of the head. I like how they kind of threw that in as just an afterthought at the very end of the article. And there's the clip right there, page 6. And they just throw it at the very end. Oh, yeah, by the way, there was horns on these skulls. All right, next. And that was it. That was the whole blurb. But I did find another article earlier, and it was dated Wednesday, July 12th of 1916. I could not find exactly what paper this was in, but there was a whole lot to it, so I didn't do that. I did pull out some very specific quotes in here that I found that were quite fun. You're going to hear me referencing one of the quotes all night because it's one of the best quotes I've ever heard. This is the specific part of discovering the horned skulls. It was a wet, cold morning when R.H. Lord, who has been employed by Professor Skinner in Indian research work for 6 years, uncovered the earth from one of the Murray Farm graves and, carefully scooping away the soil beside an Indian skull, gave a yell which brought the 15 other members of the party running to the grave. "He's got horns," shouted Lord, who obviously talks with an English accent. "He's in league with the devil." He surely had horns, and sure enough, he had horns of solid bone, which grew straight out of the skull about 2 inches above the perfectly formed skull, which gave every evidence of having been there since birth. They were no way attached to the skull. They were an integral part of it. And here are some pictures. Now, these are not the pictures of the skulls, but these are recreations, basically artwork of what the skulls may have looked like. And again, everything I just read came directly from these newspaper articles dating back to 1916. So, as we always do, I had to do some digging to find out what was going on, what's the truth behind it. I treated this just like I would any of our other urban legends that we've gone over on this show. And I'm actually going to compare it a lot to the Lovelock Caves. Remember, we did that episode, Lovelock Caves and researching the red-haired giants, and we discovered how the supposed archaeologist on that run wasn't even an archaeologist. He was like a clerk, and he had no clue what he was doing and all this kind of stuff. So we're going to compare it, kind of contrast a little bit with this one. But again, these are just kind of artist recreations of the skulls, not real artifacts from the dig. So the story goes, there was the Susquehanna Archaeological Expedition led by the Honorable Warren K. Moorhead of the Phillips Andover Academy, a member of the United States Board of Indian Commissioners, a leading authority on American archaeology, who later became the curator of the Department of American Archaeology at the Phillips Andover Academy. So the reality is, this was a real expedition. I was able to track it down. And so we're going to kind of go over what the expedition was, what supposedly happened, and then we'll go through and read the facts as I was able to find them, and we'll kind of go from there with it. So on May 16th, 1916, an expedition of 9 men left Lake Otsego at the head of the Susquehanna River, central New York, and proceeded down the stream to the mouth of the river. The purpose of the expedition was to record all the Indian sites along the main Susquehanna, and if possible, to discover a cemetery of the Andestes. Apparently, they're traversing this entire river area. It's a well-known area for Iroquois and Algonquin. It's kind of a borderline between the two nations, and the Andestes were a specific tribe of the Iroquois, I believe it was, within that nation. And so what they're looking for is they've got maps of these different sites that are supposed burial grounds and villages. And so they're conducting an archaeological survey of this whole region, this whole river valley. Okay, so the who involved, we've got the 3 academics leading this. Professor W.K. Moorhead of the Phillips Andover Academy, Professor A.B. Skinner of the American Indian Museum, and Reverend George Donahue of the Pennsylvania State Historian. We're going to talk about who these guys are, what their credentials are. A.B. Skinner was a non-Indian anthropologist who worked at the Museum of the American Indian from 1916 to 1920. He worked so as he worked there, he became curator of anthropology at the Public Museum of Milwaukee, and then he returned to the MAI until he died in 1925. So that is he's obviously well educated. He knows what's going on. Again, unlike the gentleman who did the Lovelock Caves. This guy, George Patterson Donahue, it's funny because he is probably the most educated person I've come across in all my research. And he's not even like the head of this expedition. He's just kind of along as the Pennsylvania representative, right? He was born in Connellsville, Pennsylvania, December 21st, 1862. He had 3 doctorates. Two of them were doctorates of divinity, one PhM, Latin Magister. He did pass away in 1934 at the age of 71. But check this out. He held memberships with the American Association of Advancement of Science, the American Archaeological Association, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania, the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania, the War History Commission of the Pennsylvania Council of National Defense, and the American Library Association. He also has many published works. I'm not going to go through them all. This guy was very well educated and very well connected, and was really, really into history of Pennsylvania and the archaeology. He was also a collaborator of the Bureau of American Ethnology in the preparation of the Handbook for American Indians. He served as secretary when the Pennsylvania Historical Commission was created in 1911. He also served as the state librarian and as chaplain to the Pennsylvania House and Senate. So this guy has some serious backing and serious credentials. Really brought a lot of clout and understanding to this expedition. Other members of the party, Ernest O'Sudgeon, who was a surveyor, and then the canoeman and workman Ralph Lord, who was mentioned earlier in the article. So his name actually does appear on the official register. William Hutchins, Frank Cowman, Donald Eldridge, and an S.P. Moorhead, who is the son of Professor Moorhead, and he was along as the clerk for the expedition. So again, this is the actual factual of this expedition. Here's a picture of the guys that I found. This is the 4 bigwigs of the expedition. The gear they brought, outfit consisted of 2 20-foot canoes for carrying the gear, 3 skiffs for carrying the party members and the digging gear, tents and individual camping gear, 2 blankets, rubber blanket, cot, waterproof duffel, clothing, and supplies. Why am I telling you all this, guys? Because I want you to get you guys to understand that this was a very carefully documented, organized, credited expedition. This wasn't just some kind of random thing. Oh, we heard about some bones found at a farm, and so that's what we're doing. This was a legit organized expedition down this river that came across the Murray farm and their finds there. That's kind of why I'm going into all these details, because all this is record. It's all part of it. All right, so the nitty gritty, this comes from the reports and the correspondences of the people reporting back to the historical societies and everything like that. So this is definitely the official reports coming in from the expedition. So I went through it and kind of picked out the pertinent pages. There was about 40 or 50 pages in there. So I kind of picked out the pertinent parts, to give you an idea of what they were doing and their process and everything. When the expedition was organized, it was thought that the work of the Susquehanna could be accomplished in 1 season of 4 months. It is now known it would require the 5 summers at least to properly study the main river valleys together with the Chemung, the West Branch, and the, I want to say Juanita, even though that's not right, the Juaniata. The river is subject to floods in these high water deposits as much as 2 feet of silt over some sites where other areas are left bare. The men would scatter about and sink test pits 50 or 100 yards apart over an area from 10 to 50 acres. During the day, our workmen would sink as many as 200 of these pits, or 100 in half a day. If this number of test pits resulted in no finds, the expedition would move on. So basically, as they're going down and they're finding these different sites to check out, this was their method to basically check the ground to see if there was anything worth digging. Mind you, again, this is 1916. They don't have things like, ground penetrating radar, metal detectors, or anything like that. So they're just digging test pits to see if they find anything. All right, just across the Chemung River from Athens on the MP Murray Farm on the Upper Queen Esther Flats, an Indian cemetery was found by Mr. Murray's grandfather, Abner Murray, prior to 1850. And the expedition was invited to make excavations on this site. In all, a total of 33 graves were excavated and 57 skeletons discovered. So that's a little different number. They were talking 60 some. In the newspaper article, in reality, it was 57 skeletons. There is more of the history behind the Murray's farm. But it was just basically they knew they were on top of some kind of burial site throughout the property. They had collected some of their own artifacts that they had found, some different pipes and pottery and things like that. And so Miss Murray, Mrs. MP Murray, was kind of a local historian. And so she was digging into it a lot. And she's the one that kind of invited them to come over on the expedition. And she's written a couple of books about the history of the area as well. Yeah, still a lot of skeletons to find in one area. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Little Twisted. Here's a picture of the dig going on at the farm. Actual photos of the location. All right, the bodies had been buried without regularity as to depth or position and were radiated in every direction. Not accompanied by relics in the majority of the cases. Only a few graves contained objects, and these were often badly broken. No bodies were found stretched at length, but flexed burials, and most of the bones were in very poor condition, as were the majority of the relics found in them. So I just kind of wrote bullet points and synopsis here. Basically, what they're saying is the grave area, the burial site, was very haphazard. It wasn't organized and in rows like we would think of a cemetery. It was very much buried as they lay. Sometimes there was multiple pits, bodies buried on top of each other at different depths. No specific way, like they weren't all facing east or anything like that. The bones were very poor condition. At one part of the report, it said the bones were very cheesy. Their exact words, I have no clue what they meant by cheesy, but that's the word they use for it. Most of the relics found were basically broken pottery pieces. And we'll go over that later as to some of the other things that were found. But what they're saying, this wasn't an organized burial system. Everything was just kind of haphazard and they're thrown together. Often one grave contained several bodies at different levels. One bundle burial had heaped over a ceremonial deposit of the antlers completely covered, or antlers of deer completely covering the skeleton. We need to remember that note. That's why I have it underlined. This comes up as an important factor later on. Okay. One bundle burial had heaped over a ceremonial deposit of the antlers of deer completely covering the skeletons. Some burials were minus their heads, and at least one disassociated skull was found. So they found a skull by itself, at least one, and then many of the bodies were missing skulls. Another picture of the work site there. Hi, Sunny11. Welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. I saw you sneak in there. Trying to keep an eye over here on the chat as well as I'm going through everything. All right. Work was continued on the Murray farm until June 18th. I don't know why I go through and I make corrections to the spelling on my slides, but for some reason it doesn't always carry over. Several of the expeditions were made along the eastern shore of the river, and then the expedition left the area in the morning of June 21st. Little twisted missing skulls, thanks Smithsonian. Well, the Smithsonian. Wow, I cannot speak tonight. The Smithsonian had nothing to do with this expedition. They were not involved at all. And secondly, they were missing in the graves. So it wasn't like they were dug up, cataloged, and then turned up missing. They're saying when they actually excavated the site, they were missing skulls. All right, so what's going on? Where did the story of the giants and horn skulls come from? Right? Because in none of those reports, in none of the 30 or 40 pages of reports that I read, did it say anything about horn skulls or giants. Right? Absolutely nothing in there. And I'm not the only one that noticed that. It was in the newspaper articles, but not in any of the other reports. And so I'm digging further, and I came across this woman by the name of Emily Hurley. And she thinks she knows what happened. She researched it herself. So we're going to go and see what she had to say. She is an inventory specialist at the Robert S. Peabody Institute of Archaeology. So basically her job is to go through inventories and then make sure they're organized properly, they're tagged properly, they're stored in a way that's going to provide preservation properly, and basically update the systems. And so things that were stored back in the 1800s, early 1900s, they could be updated into a more proper, adequate storage for preservation and properly labeled. She has master's in archaeology or bachelor's in archaeology, and then a master in like museum curation or something like that, very specifically. And so that's what she does. Is she goes here with the Archaeological Institute and works on preserving and cataloging all of their stuff. So on October 26th of 2020, she posted a blog on the Peabody website called The Horn Giants of Pennsylvania. And these are her words from her blog directly, okay? She wrote, "One day while I was working in the basement of the Peabody, plugging away at inventory drawers, I was listening to a podcast called Astonishing Legends." Cool plug. That is a great show. If you guys have never heard of it, check it out. They have an absolutely fascinating one on the Patterson-Gimlin film. I believe it's like 13 episodes long. They do a full breakdown on it. Anyway, it was an episode entitled The Tall Ones, exploring the legends and lore surrounding giants around the world. It came as a surprise when I heard the host say the name W.K. Moorhead. My ears instantly pricked up. With her being an archaeologist, she is well aware of who Moorhead was and his research and his findings. And so it caught her attention that they're bringing up an actual archaeologist that she knows about. The podcast host went on to cite the New York Times article written on July 14th, 1916, under the headline, "Find Horned Men's Skulls, Remarkable Discovery by Archaeologists in the Susquehanna Valley." I tried to locate this article, but the New York Times is behind a paywall, so I was unable to pull it up, unfortunately. It said I could have if I subscribed, and I just don't do that. So I could not pull up the direct article. It is not the one previously. That one was written July 12th, if you remember correctly. So it's not the same article that we have up above that's unknown. The short article stated that the Phillips Andover Academy uncovered a burial mound at the Murray Farm site while conducting research in the Susquehanna Valley. In the mound, they uncovered the remains of 68 men. The official report, as we saw, was 57. But they're saying 68 men believed to have been buried around the year 1200 AD. According to the article, the average height of these men was 7 feet, with many being even taller. Also found with the remains were very large stone celts and axes, further evidence of the men's gigantic size. Perhaps most interesting of all, some of the skulls had 2-inch bone protuberances on their foreheads. Well, this was something to explore. So she's hearing this and she's like, wow, I never heard of this. Let me check it out. Now, in none of the official reports that I read, did they find any axes or stone celts or big tools at all. They had found pieces of pottery, some broken pipes, some antler carved effigies, things like that, but nowhere did it mention gigantic axes or anything like that. And again, no references of the height of these men, and 57 as opposed to 68. So some discrepancies in the article. But Miss Emily has access to the information, and so she wanted to dig in. After hearing the podcast, she did some digging of my own through Moorhead's records. So she had access to his direct records. Just in case I could find anything related to the Horned Giants, I found many documents related to the Susquehanna Valley expedition, as well as correspondences between Moorhead, Skinner, and Donahue. None of these documents ever mentioned the Horned Giants or the article written in the New York Times. She did find a picture of Professor Skinner holding a perfectly normal-looking skull with no protuberances while at the Murray Farm. And Moorhead also wrote a short report of the excavation, and again, no mention of the giants was found. And the report she's referring to, I believe, is the one that I found included in the Pennsylvania Geological Survey book that I came across. I believe that's what she's referring to. And again, there's absolutely no mention of giants in that one at all. They were just normal skeletons. After some further digging, it was discovered that the horned giants found by Moorhead and others at the Murray Farm were not horned at all, nor were they giants. Professor Skinner wrote a corrected article for the New York Times, but it was not as publicized as the original, so it is harder to find. Again, I went to try and find it. The New York Times has the paywall. She did have a link to it in her blog. So if any of you out there are subscribers to the New York Times, you can go to the Peabody Institute, pull up this article, click on the link, and you should be able to find where Professor Skinner wrote a corrected article for the New York Times. Apparently, well, and this is great. Remember that saying from earlier, he's got horns, the English accent. Apparently, while excavating the site, a workman shouted out, "There are horns over his head," after discovering a bundle burial which had been covered with deer antlers. Right? Remember we talked about that? They did mention that. An excited visitor or reporter at the site heard this and asked another workman, who decided to play a joke and claim that the skeletons had horns growing out of their heads. Now, I will say this, that is what she believes. She doesn't cite any specific documentation as to that happening, but that is her assessment of what probably happened given the information. We did hear in the one article where the guy was shouting, "He's got horns," which, again, I think that's one of the greatest quotes. I can just hear some guy in an old English Cockney accent shouting that out, which I thought was weird because the guy was born in Pennsylvania. Not sure why they quoted him as having an English accent. I'm sorry, Maine, not Pennsylvania. He was born in Maine. They actually give his birthplace, but apparently he spoke with an English accent. Not sure where that came from. That explains the story about the horns, but what about the supposed enormous height of the individuals and other accounts of giants? It is thought that these skeletons, as well as accounts of living giant Susquehannocks, Indians from the Susquehanna River Valley there, were not giant at all, but just taller than the average. At the time, the average height of most Europeans was about 5'6" tall, whereas Native Americans were thought to be an average about 6 foot tall. While 6 inches is not that big of a difference, anyone taller than 6 feet may seem like a giant to the generally shorter Europeans, and I can get that. I'm barely 5'6", 5'7" myself. I have nephews that are like 6'1", 6'2", and I feel just absolutely minute compared to them. So I can understand that. So her perception of it is there were already rumors of the giants in the area, that the Indians were giants in the area. And so that just kind of bled over into when they found out that there was excavations of the graves. They must be giants because they were giants already, that kind of a thing. Again, this is all her wording from her blog. Even though the horned giants of Pennsylvania turned out to be nothing more than a tall tale, pun intended, it was fun to hear a story about Moorhead on one of my new favorite podcasts. I wonder what interesting stories I'll uncover next. So that is Emily's talking about. And a few things I want to point out. She's already is listening to our kinds of shows, guys. She's listening to Astonishing Legends, which means she is at least interested in hearing about the other side of things, the alternative viewpoints of things. And so I think that means that if she had found something, I believe she may have reported it at least somewhere, maybe anonymously or something like that. Maybe not come directly out and say it because, of her job or anything like that, because I know that can be a concern. But at the same time, I think she would put the information out there, given the fact that she has an interest in that kind of stuff. She calls Astonishing Legends her new favorite podcast. So it kind of leans me to that direction. So there's no evidence supports the claim of the horned skulls or the giants. It was an actual factual expedition that happened. They did find mass burial sites. They found 57 skeletons and 30 some graves. It was a legit expedition by legit people who never reported anything strange at all. So here's the question. Is it just another urban legend? Was it a joke blown out of proportion, as Emily Hurley suggests? Or was it a cover-up of evidence, as other people suggest? What do you guys think? So what do you guys think? There's a lot of options there, right? I do believe that if there was evidence of giants, I do believe it would be covered up. I have no issue with that. I believe there were instances where giant skeletons have been found and have been covered up, because normally in the original reports, when they have the measurements and things, they're reported correctly. And then later on, you get the other reports that say, oh, they measured incorrectly, or the skeletons weren't put together properly, so it added an extra foot to the overall height. Things like that I've read. But in this one, just nothing was mentioned at all. And then when Emily did her digging in the actual records, she didn't find anything as well either. So I think this is another one where there was a legitimate thing. Maybe the whole joke thing where the guy said, oh yeah, no, there's horns burn out could have happened. Or, as we've already been learning about the newspaper standards back in the day, they could have gotten the story and just kind of put a bunch of different stuff together and decided to sell some newspapers with these horned skulls. Kind of what I think, may have happened with it. I was going to go digging because there are some interesting things out there. If you look up humans with horns, but not really horns. I found an article which I thought was interesting given our day and age, where it says younger people that grew up on cell phones and smartphones are starting to grow a horn at the base of their skull in response to always looking down at their phones. It's a little bump that's normally there in their skulls for ligament attachment and muscle attachment, but apparently the constant leaning over and looking down at your phone, from youth on up to the growing stages, is actually starting to produce a horn on the back of the people's skulls. Now, I did see there was several articles disputing that fact as well. They're saying no, it's just a genetic anomaly. It has nothing actually to do with the phones. It's just something that happens. Like some people with an extended tailbone, that kind of a thing. So even that's in dispute. The other thing was humans growing horn-like protuberances out of their skin and their face, their head, but those are more of like really bad cases of warts. To put it very simply, they're not exactly warts, but they're kind of like warts growing out of the skin, and they look like horns. Um, which is actually something that happens on animals at times. It's a known thing. It's part of the wart family, and they can grow what looks like horns, but they're not actual bone. They're not actually attached to the skull or anything like that. And it's believed, just a little side note, that that phenomenon is what led up to the story of jackalopes. If you ever researched jackalopes as a real creature, they say that could be where the original story started from, was rabbits with this virus of warts growing on their heads, which they have pictures of. It's kind of wild. So yeah, they'll twist, yeah, like cartilage. Yeah, basically. And so there have been other newspaper articles out there about skulls being found. There's specifically one out of Ohio that I came across, but there was nothing I could reference. There was no specific research on it that I could pull. It was just, some people digging in Ohio found these skulls with horns on them. There really wasn't anything I could track down. So I think that was just another blurb, another quick newspaper thing. But I could not track down anything anywhere outside of this Pennsylvania story that would indicate the reality of any naturally horned human skulls found at all. So, as far as I'm concerned, this is just an urban legend that's kind of grown. A lot of people scoff at it, but what they don't realize is that it was a real expedition. They just didn't find what they said they found. So again, thanks, Little Twisted. Awesome topic. I really enjoyed checking it out. Next week, I have a special guest lined up. I'm pretty excited for it. We're going to go back to Appalachia and talk about some Appalachia lore. Might even possibly have a surprise guest on top of her as well. So we will see. Maybe 2 guests next week. Hopefully by then I can figure out what is going on with my audio. So I can do everything on my laptop again instead of this weird angle. This is kind of freaking me out a little bit. But it is what it is. I forgot to do this because I was distracted by everything else. I did put an email address up. I'll run it across the screen here for you guys real quick. You can email me, tnsasquatch21@gmail.com. If you guys want to send me show requests, you can definitely hit me up on Facebook, send it to me directly. However, I love getting topics from you guys because I want to know what you guys want to know about. I can sit back and do a lot of my own research and things that fascinate me. But I want to know what fascinates you guys because I can go down some really, really weird rabbit holes. And as Jennifer, my fiance, can tell you, I can bore people completely to death on some of the stuff that I get into. So I want to know what you guys are into. I know a Little Twisted talking about the Nephilim there. We could do a show on the Nephilim sometime, maybe do my twist on it. Nephilim is kind of done a lot, but I think I have a little bit different take on the Nephilim. what they are, what they aren't, how they actually factor into our world history, different things like that. Maybe something you guys have heard before, maybe not. That could be a topic for future reference here if we want to dive into it. But yeah, feel free to email me any questions, guys. Anything you want to throw out there, throw it in the caps for me. Tammy Johnson, you are welcome. Thank you for tuning in and listening. If you missed it, this is recorded. Go back and check it. Watch from the beginning. The first several minutes are technical difficulties, but we get it rolling there eventually. Little Twisted, love to hear your perspective. Yeah, I'll put that down as one of our future shows. I can throw one together. Sunny 11, giant skeletons were put on large boats and dumped in the ocean by the Smithsonian. Legends have truth to them. A lot of cover-ups about giants. JMHO. You know, I've heard that before. I think it's interesting. I do believe that there would be an effort to cover up any giants, anything fantastical, anything beyond the normal by the powers that be. I'm not going to sit here and try and name groups or anything because no clue, right? Because it makes sense. Because if you can start believing in things like giants or dragons or fairy folk or things like that, if that stuff is real, then you have to start asking yourself what else is real, right? And the more you know, the more knowledge you have, the more power you have over your life and over the world around you and the understanding. And the more in awe you are of nature and of God's creation, the less awe you are of those people, those organizations, those whatever trying to control you. So I really believe that if these things are real, that there would be an attempt to try and cover it up. A lot of people go, why? Why would they cover it up? I think it's a lot bigger than just one government or one organization or, you know, the forestry department. I think it's a lot bigger than just that. I think they want to really cap a lot of information on it. And I can get into why I believe that. It's more religiously oriented. I'm a Bible believer. I'm a Christian. And I believe that, you know, there is a spiritual war going on between good and evil. And I think that is part of evil's idea, because if you can believe and have proof of fantastical things like giants and other beasts, then it opens up your mind to the possibility of the spiritual realm as well. And I think they want to do that. They say the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he did not exist. And I actually believe that. So, not to get on that soapbox, that's something totally different than the rabbit hole, but that is just kind of my background on it. Knowledge is power. A little twisted, it would destroy the indoctrination of the Roman Catholic Church. Maybe, like I said, I don't pinpoint a specific organization. I think the threads are involved are anywhere and everywhere, but not comprehensive. I would not say the entirety of the Roman Catholic people, church, religion, congregations are evil and part of a cover-up at all, but I believe there are threads within it that are nefarious, if that makes sense, right? And that goes with any organization, whether it's religious, whether it's governmental, whether it's educational institution, doesn't matter. The threads are there. So, all right, guys, anything else? Any other questions? Any other potential research topics any of you guys want to hear about? I saw some new names in the crowd tonight. Feel free to throw something out, guys. I am not shy about researching stuff. I love digging in and finding out new things. Any of our new listeners out there, anybody that's just listening and not with us live, you can email me, tnsasquatch21@gmail.com. Find me on Facebook. You can either go to Bigfoot Outlaw on Facebook and contact me through there, our YouTube channel group, or you can find me, Justin Decker, on Facebook and contact me directly, that is fine. I have several of you on my Facebook. I consider you guys friends. I know Tammy and I were having a conversation earlier today. I've talked to Roger Blair several times. I mean, there's just a lot of good guys, a lot of good women. Thank you, Little Twisted. I'm good at it. I appreciate it. It's something I enjoy. I've always been the nerd. I've always said that if I was born back in the days, 1600s, 1500s, Middle Ages, whenever, I would be that scholarly monk buried in the basement with candlelights and going over all the scrolls and books and everything. I would be buried at the Library of Alexandria and, just gone forever, just researching anything as I possibly could, because that's just what I love to do. All right. If we have no other comments, no other questions, let me go back through and look to see if I missed anything. Not seeing a whole lot. All right. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Set up for the alerts so whenever one of our Bigfoot Outlaw shows come on, you can be there to watch it live on YouTube. We have a whole bunch of different shows, everything from psychics to true crimes to Bigfoot to my show. We're all just kind of one big happy family here at Bigfoot Outlaw. And anything that you guys like to hear about, we have it somewhere on the channel. So again, like, subscribe, share it with everybody, guys. Let's keep growing. We are all over the media world. We are all over various platforms. I couldn't tell you them all. Grizzly could, but I know it's up there between Facebook platforms and podcast platforms and TikToks now and all these other things. We're into the hundreds of different platforms that you can reach us on. If you want to get involved in the conversation, just come on live on our YouTube channel. So, as Grizzly would say, guys, coast to coast and around the world, y'all have a fantastic night. We'll catch you next time on the rabbit hole. We're going to do an outro here for you, and you guys know which one I'm going to do, right? My favorite one. We'll see you guys next week.
It's a grizzly.
Should we get out of here?
No. We're gonna watch and listen.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, shit, should we run?
No.
Action.
It's a grizzly.
Oh, should we run?
Okay. It's a grizzly.
Are you sure it's not a chipmunk? Action. No, I'm out of here. Action.
It's a grizzly.
I'm out of here.
Huh. Maybe it is a chipmunk. It's a grizzly.
Are we gonna die?
I don't know. We're just gonna sit here and listen and watch.
Let's get out of here, maybe.
Fall!